Today, for the vast majority of American motorcycle enthusiasts, Harley Davidson is known as the king of America's roads. However, in 1985, the iconic brand found itself within just hours of bankruptcy. Overwhelmed by the Japanese competition, the recession that had hit America, and the onslaught of management missteps, the company needed to change something if it was going to survive. And in 1985, the company did just that. In 1985, Ken Schmidt was hired as the company's chief communication officer and was charged with communicating to both customers and potential investors alike while trying to work with the leadership team to find a new strategy and a path for survival. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce to you my good friend, Ken Schmidt.
Some shows don't need a celebrity narrator to introduce the show, but this show does. 2 men, 8 kids, co-created by 2 different women, 13 multi-million-dollar businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Thrivetime Show.
3, 2, 1, here we go!
Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, and we'll show you how to get here. Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, and we'll show you how to get here.
In 1985, when Ken Schmidt joined Harley Davidson as their chief communications officer, the company was making bikes that were actually winning awards. So they were buying into the lie that a great product will sell itself. They won the quality awards. They were focusing on quality, but they weren't selling anything. They weren't making a profit. And that is where Ken started. So ladies and gentlemen, let's hear from Mr. Ken Schmidt.
Hey!
So Ken, you started from the bottom when the company had great bikes, but you weren't making any money. How did you fix it?
I did it all in one day. Wow. Hey, I got a question for you. Where the heck are we?
Tulsa, Oklahoma.
This is wild, man.
It's like the Disneyland of entrepreneurship.
Never seen anything like this. I came in from Washington, D.C. last night, and I thought this was going to be a meeting room in a hotel, frankly. So this is kind of blowing my mind. You got a band, for God's sake, and they're dressed in Christmas clothing. This is really cool.
We're stealing from your playbook.
Hey, right on. Okay. Try to keep this short. I tend to be long-winded, and apologize for that. Let me tell you what I did on my first day of work at a company that had just 2 weeks before I started laid off 40% of its workforce. That's both on the manufacturing side and that's on the internal side. So finance, marketing, administration, mailroom, welders, painters. The blood was splattered everywhere. There was not a bank in America that would issue Harley Davidson a line of credit in September of 1985, which is why my first official job at the company was putting together our communication plan to announce to the world that we were filing for bankruptcy, which I can tell you is a really shitty time to start a new job. Okay. Everyone says, "Who'd you call first? The unions?" I said, "No, I called my wife and said, don't buy anything. Click, ship's going down." No money to spend. And that's a very, very important element of all this, and all the more kind of magnificent about why what we started to do began working. Because frankly, I think if we had a lot of money to spend, the company that you see and know today probably wouldn't exist. We'd have spent ourselves out of existence because we were focused, as I'll get to in a minute, on all of the wrong things. I was getting a lot of ideas from people inside the company about what we needed to do to, change the company's image, because the company had a horrendous image at that time. Think, Hell's Angels and outlaws and banditos and drug runners and cop killers and all that other kind of nonsense.
Sounds pretty bad.
Business. So I was getting a lot of ideas from people about what we needed to do and how we needed to convince people to buy the product, all of which required money. So first day of work, I pounded out 3 questions on my typewriter. Typewriter, folks, it's a communication device used for, anyway. And those 3 questions, I know that they're very, very important questions, and I'll hit you with them in just a second, but they essentially became the foundation upon which we built a global empire. a global brand. And the three questions are, what are people saying about us? What do we want them to say about us? And what are we doing to make them say it?
Ken, I want to ask you this.
Yeah.
And I want all the Thrivers to know, on page 107, if you're following along, Ken asked these three questions, and other companies that ask these questions would be Whole Foods. Whole Foods has asked these questions. Apple has asked these questions. Chick-fil-A has asked
One of my
these.
favorite businesses.
Starbucks
Chick-fil-A.
has asked these questions. Most small business owners never ask these questions, so we get stuck talking about how we don't have a lot of resources. So once you asked those questions, tell us what happened next.
Okay, but essentially the reason I was doing this was say, look, we don't have money to spend. We need to assess what our, and internalize and understand what our current reputation is, what people are saying about us, but then we also need to create our sort of, plant our flag in the sand of what we want people saying about us. What do we want our reputation to be? And then third and finally, how can we harness the power of our customer base and our dealer base and our supplier base, anyone who's important to the business, to talk about us, to spread our narrative the way we want it to be spread, so that people, won't be afraid of us, will be drawn toward us, and will see us differently than maybe they did in the past. And that's not stuff that can be done with advertising. Thank God, it's basically saying, let's harness the power of the people that we serve and make them advocates for us. And it's a lot easier, frankly, than it sounds.
There was a book called Radical Marketing, which basically, it's a case study about what you were doing. I don't know if are you aware of the book they wrote about you?
No.
So Radical is a book that explains what Ken did, and it's really funny. No, seriously, this is a book I read about this guy before I read the book that you wrote. And so reading this book, and they were talking about how Harley customers like loud motors.
Yes.
You have handlebar designs you liked. And apparently before you got there, there was a rush to make the bikes more efficient, more like compete with the Japanese bikes, almost like a rush to the bottom. Yep. Can you talk to me about some of the bad ideas that Harley was pushing out that were not working before you began to ask these?
To that point is we learned a horrible but incredibly valuable lesson that the rest of the world, especially people that manufacture, build, or sell a product, either haven't learned or are about to learn the hard way. As we were 100% internally focused, 100%, as we needed to build a product that was, and I need fingers for this, world-class and bulletproof and industry-leading and have superior quality and reliability and quality and all that stuff that people associate with a good product. Because our belief was, geez, the reason people aren't buying our products the way they did in the past is because stuff coming from Japan or Germany was seen as better than ours. So if we made something world class, well, everybody would come and want to buy the American option. Tons of things were done. Tons of improvements were made. Incredible stuff happening in the manufacturing plants that resulted in what you just mentioned. Absolutely world-class products coming out of Harley. And every motorcycle magazine on the planet put us on their covers, and we'd never been on bike magazine covers since like the 1930s because nobody liked us because we sold to thugs and criminals and rapists. Profitable little market niches though, so don't knock it. And this is where we're about to learn the lesson, because once those bikes came out for the 1986 model year, everybody took their foot off the gas. I said, we did it. Woohoo! Like light up the cigars, because there's going to be a stampede of people coming in to buy product, and now we're about to learn the ugly lesson. We're saying there's all this buzz in the market, very, very positive word of mouth. People are interested. People are coming into dealerships that hadn't before. Floor traffic was up, and sales went down. 1986 was the worst year in the company's history. After the bankruptcy. I mean, it just couldn't possibly be a worse scenario to happen. So that's when a lot of people thought, well, they had their chance, they had their window of time. And I'm talking about people inside the company. We had our chance, we had our time, and we blew it. And the lesson that we learned here, simply put, is if you live by product, you're going to die by product, because you cannot make your product your competitive lever in a world where everyone has competition. Unless you have something that's absolutely brand new that nobody has ever seen before. If you are competing in an existing market and relying on your product, or eventually even your service, to give you your competitive advantage, you're essentially dooming yourself because you're going up against other businesses that have product that is equally good and a lot of times priced lower. So we made customers, potential customers, focus on our product as our competitive lever. And they all said, wow, this stuff looks really good and it's awesome, but I can get a Honda for 40% of the price of the Harley. Why wouldn't I do that? And we did not have an answer for that. That's why it was the worst year in the company's history. All that investment in product and all that incredible success around the product and making it great brought something into the marketplace that the world saw as great, but on par with everything. Hey, you're back in the game. Awesome. What else have you got? And we didn't have anything else.
On page 108 of your boom book, you'll read a Seth Godin quote. And Seth
I don't
Godin,
like Seth.
You don't like
Go
Seth? Seth said, he said, in a crowded marketplace, fitting in is failing. Not standing out is the same as being invisible. Boring is invisible. Remarkable people and products get talked about. You began to do things that were remarkable, that created a culture, an experience, a people who are willing to get tattoos of your brand. Now, I'm not knocking anybody out here who's a plumber or a dentist or a lawyer, but wouldn't it be cool if people loved your dentistry so much that you come in the next time and they've got Dr. Doug's dental tattooed on their arm? Like, man, you sold out. I mean, wouldn't it be cool if you're Nike, you get people see Nike tattoos, you see Apple tattoos, and so you guys created a brand that was so remarkable that people were willing to tattoo themselves with it. How did you go about doing that?
Let me tell you how we did this. The beauty of what we did is entirely born out of failure. And the only reason I say that is because people say, how did you discover all these new ideas to do anything, to do something different? How did you get people to support it and rally behind it? And it was like, because we didn't have any money to do anything else. And secondly, because frankly, we were all fighting to save our jobs. What was it that motivated people? Pretty simple. It's the thought of not getting a paycheck in a city like Milwaukee, Wisconsin, or York, Pennsylvania, where there were no other employers. There's nothing else for people to do. It was awful. So let me tell you another accidental discovery that we stumbled onto by accident that completely changed the trajectory of the business. Because we were getting all these really positive write-ups about product, and because the product really did kick, it was spectacular and beautiful and everything else, we were really challenged by this notion of if we could get people to get on one of these things, take it for a ride, and have the same sort of experience that these guys that these critics at the bike mags are having, well, then they would see how awesome it is. The unfortunate reality was, in the bike market in the mid-1980s, there was no such thing as a test ride. Nobody, no Honda, Yamaha, BMW, Kawasaki, nobody would allow people to take their products for a test ride because there was too much fear of liability. Somebody's going to crash, they're going to sue us, right? And the whole house of cards is going to come tumbling down. We had, thank God, a very different perception of risk management, and it was essentially, we're broke. Sue us. We haven't got anything.
I want to bring this up real quick because this is powerful. And on page 111, this is an action step you have to do to do what to take what he's teaching and make it practical for your life. That's called a no-brainer. It's a deal so good. I mean, to test drive a Harley for the low cost of free, that seems kind of fun. Mm-hmm. That's not conventional. Dr. Zellner, my partner, who you met last night, his glasses, the first pair of glasses and the exam are $99. Doesn't make a lot of money on that deal, but they want you to come back and buy other stuff. Our first haircut at Elephant in the Room is $1. It's a deal so good, how could you say no to it? Everybody in here needs a no-brainer. So on page 111, there are a lot of no-brainers listed for you, and you need to find the one that's going to work for you. But if you guys hadn't done that test drive move, it probably wouldn't have worked out, right?
And so here's the big takeaway from that. So we took all of our money that would have been spent advertising. Everybody says it's really hard to measure the effectiveness of advertising. Well, I can tell you this, when you're advertising and selling nothing, it's very easy to prove. Our advertising isn't working.
Carry the 1, 0.
Very allocation of resources, as they say in accounting spheres. So our idea was, instead of advertising, we're going to lease 2 trucks, 2 semis, and we're going to load these trucks up with bikes, 44 bikes to a truck, take them out anywhere where there's likely to be a lot of blue-collar, metal-bending type people, our traditional customers, and allow anybody with a bike license or anything that, if you kind of squinted your eyes, look like a bike license, put them on the bike and let them go for 15 miles. Detroit, Tulsa, Cleveland, these metal bending kind of old school cities, a lot of people were showing up. They were taking test rides. Better than half the people that showed up, and this was awesome, were rolling up on Japanese motorcycles. And those were people that we could not convert, get them to step up and buy a bike that essentially does the same thing but costs twice as much money.
It kind of sounds like zzz.
Yeah. This is like a sewing machine, like something an old lady would ride. Anyway. I kid the Japanese bike owners. You're awesome. You rock. Don't come near me. Anyway.
Just rock over there by yourself.
Here's what we start discovering doing the demos. And this is what I say is going to change the trajectory of the business. It's an accidental discovery that becomes the blessing that changes the trajectory of the business. Because larger and larger crowds are showing up to take demo rides, the lines are getting longer. And what do we know about people standing in lines? They don't like to wait for things. So there'd be 10 people standing in line to ride a specific bike. The guy would take the bike, take his 15-mile ride, would get off, and as soon as he'd get off, we'd have our employee volunteers standing here. You'd have the bike right here, and you'd have the person, the man or woman who just got off the bike right there. I think we can all agree this is as selling dynamics go, it don't get any better than that. Your people, your product, potential customer. 100% of people, as soon as they would get off the bike, would do this. They'd pull their bike off, they'd pull their leg, and they would stare right at us. And the reason they're staring right at us is pretty freaking obvious. They expect us to say something. They expect there's going to be a conversation here. But what we found is anytime we started talking to this guy, the people standing in the line would start bitching. Come on, let's go. Boo, get it moving. So then we say, well, look, if we know everybody either wants to say something or wants to ask a question, let's figure out a way to do this as quickly as possible, because it would be stupid to not listen to what these people have to say. And this is when the clouds open and literally the hand of God reaches down and saves the business. Because we invented, and about the time it took me to just tell that story, a question that people could answer very quickly. And the question we asked everybody is, what do we need to change on this bike to get you to buy it? And here's where we make the discovery. The discovery is 100% of human beings standing next to another human being and asked a question will answer the question.
Ooh.
When's the last time you filled out a survey card? When's the last time you filled out a survey card in your hotel room? Nobody does this. Why? Because we don't think it's impersonal.
I need you to preach the good news on this. There's somebody out there today who's fighting this a little bit. Not here. It's a friend of yours who's at a different conference. Mm-hmm. But I'll work with business owners, not you, just fictitious business owners, but other people. And they'll say, like a lot of dentists, doctors, lawyers who I've never met will say these kinds of things. They'll say, I have a program where I text people and ask them for a Google review, mass text, or I mass email. And I go, that's cool. You have one Google review, and you're at the bottom of Google. And then they'll say, well, how does OxyFresh, your carpet cleaning business, have 147,000 Google reviews? We'll pull that up on the screen there. 147,000 Google reviews OxyFresh has now. 147,000 Google reviews. We're top in the world, the 386 markets. And we do not ever get a Google review from emailing, nor do we even get a sincere response. So we ask people face to face, how was it today? What could we do better? We write it down, and then we ask, why is it so important to be face-to-face? Why does it not work in the digital age to automate your surveys?
The more, I guess the takeaway from all that is the more human your business is, that means the more visible it is, the more human, the more you take the invisible out of the equation. That's the digital stuff. That's the faceless, baseless, nameless question or the survey. The more you humanize the business, the faster people respond to that, because we all know how to do that. And we all see and recognize value in talking to another human being about what they could do better to help us versus filling out a survey after the fact or maybe 2 days later where you go, well, I was right there next to the guy. What's he going to do with this information now? So what starts happening is 100% of people are answering this question, and they're giving us incredibly simple but brilliant intel. They're saying, I love the bike, but I can't reach the handlebars. Could they be higher? Could they be lower? Could they be wider, narrower? Could they be curled back? Could the seat be higher? Could the seat be lower? Could the foot controls be further forward, further back, longer, shorter? Harley's a metal bending business. So the question comes down, what are people asking us to do? Is bend metal the way they want it bent. What are they saying they will do if we bend it the way they want it bent? They're saying that they will buy it because it'll fit their body, for God's sake. Why aren't we doing this? We had like 12 varieties of handlebars in 1985. There's probably 300 varieties of handlebars. It's one phone call. Start bending them this way. Click. Guys in the plant hit a few buttons on the CNC machine and the bars come out this way. Almost immediately, word of mouth in the industry starts going in a completely different trajectory. And media and bike mags are writing about this because no businesses were doing that at that time. They're gathering customer intel, and here's the important thing, doing it right in front of customers so that they can see you doing this, asking the questions, gathering that intelligence, but we're also seeing a result, and seeing the result pretty quickly. A few months later, there's stuff coming out into the market, and we're not saying buy this stuff because it's cool. We're saying this is what you asked us to do. And this is what we're doing. We're listening to you. We ride with you. We can't succeed without you. All messaging was about the rider or the potential rider, taking the focus away from the product and putting it on the person that we wanted to sell the product to.
Let's think about what you learned and how it affected the actual dealerships.
Yeah.
Because we go to page 112 of the Boom Book. How many people, by show of hands, have a brick and mortar company? How many people have a service where you go out to someone's home, you go there? Okay, so for OxyFresh carpet cleaning, the business that I've helped coach for years, we were showing that to you. We've now top in Google in the world for the phrase carpet cleaning quotes. A lot of people said, we would like, these are face-to-face conversations, we would like it if you would have uniformed people showing up to clean our carpets. And we'd like it if the uniform, if it was a nice uniform, if they showed up on time, if we could book a time and they were on time. If they would ever take a shower previous to coming over, that would be awesome. If they could use less water so my carpet wasn't wet, for a week. If you guys could find a way to do that. If we could schedule online. And if you see page 112, there's a big checklist of things you can do, specific things to create this kind of wow experience. But how did the feedback you got from the bikers, how did that work its way into the dealership experience? How did you change that?
Pretty easy, because as we're standing, this was literally when we were doing these demo rides and taking these trucks out with a small band of employee volunteers. This was literally the first time for most people that in most markets that we went into that motorcycle people could stand toe to toe with people from quote unquote the factory. So now I'm talking to factory people here at Harley. I mean, it blows my mind that wasn't happening, but it wasn't. We sold a product, dealers bought the product, and they resold it. So now they're standing toe-to-toe with people from the factory, and they can see that these people from the factory are asking them questions about this thing that we do and how we can do it better and serve people better. And people were really digging that, but a lot of feedback we were getting from people was, I'd really like to buy the product. And it was mostly men at this time, and it's kind of important to realize at this time that the single largest hindrance to motorcycle ownership wasn't ability to ride a bike, it was spousal or important other approval. And my wife will not enter a Harley dealership with me because they look horrible. They look scary, they're full of criminals and thugs and drug runners, right? Selling these unreliable products. All this ugly stuff surrounded the most important part of the business, the point of the sale. So we get in a meeting room like this full of our dealers who are literally hanging by a thread. A lot of them filed for bankruptcy. A lot of them lost their franchises, second, third, even fourth generation people. The ceiling's about this high. 90% of people in the room are smoking. It's hot. It's kind of a hostile environment, and we have to get in front of them and say, look, you're scaring people away. You are scaring people. They're not comfortable with this environment. People that are curious that want to come in are not coming in. And of course, they didn't take that feedback very well because it was basically blaming them for the problem. But we said, but what if, because we're positioning the product that we sell as a premium product, which is a fancy euphemism for really frickin' expensive. If we're going to be selling something that's premium, the environment has to reflect that. We have to have that initial visual connection that, like, wow, this is high end, this is really cool. And we didn't have that. And this is how this plays out. We get two dealers, one in Milwaukee and the other in Kansas City, to agree to work with us to completely revitalize their retail environment. And yeah, this is expensive, but nowhere near the kind of money that people spend now. But for businesses that are hanging by a thread, asking them to make these investments was huge. Right. So we helped these first two. We're going to do these as a test. And what we're going to do is we're going to change the physical environment of this. Most dealerships didn't have paved parking lots, okay? I mean, that's an automatic. We work with these two stores, and every week, every Friday, we would send a telegram. That was our mode of communication with our dealers at that time, because most of them would not buy fax machines, and this was pre-internet. We send everybody a telegram of just bullet points. Here's everything that happened this week in these two stores. Here's the problem that we ran into. Here's how we solved that problem. Here's how much this cost. We're going to be as transparent as possible. Here's why this happened. Here's why this worked, why it didn't work. After about 12 months of this, the projects are done. The new stores are done. The employees in the stores, and this is really important, are trained to not push product, but instead to welcome people and delight them. These first two stores completely recoup their investments in a very difficult market in less than 18 months. The rest of the dealer network starts catching on to this, not because we're telling them to do this, but because dealers that surrounded the revitalized dealerships in Kansas City and Milwaukee began noticing that all their customers were going to these revitalized shops. So the message became pretty clear that, oh God, I need to do this, or they're going to siphon away all my customers. And like dominoes all across America, then Canada, then Europe, dealerships had tried to one-up each other by creating these really cool environments that people found attractive. And that's essentially what saved the business, because it's a street business. And what we would always tell dealers is that, man, you don't have to be the best dealership in the world. You don't need to save Harley. All you need to do is be the best bike dealership in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Because if you're beating the other guys, you win. If you win, we all win. On page 112 and 113, there's a checklist of things that you could, very specific, actionable things you can do. And I'm just going to give go 90 miles an hour, giving you a lot of examples here. You create a smell that wows your customers. And this isn't by doing just one thing, it's all the things. There's an automotive repair shop I worked with, and they started offering fresh cookies, like really nice gourmet cookies when you walk in, and it always smelled nice. That's big. People came back for that. They mentioned that. Totally non-expected. Right. The sights, the visuals. We put pictures of old-time cars. We did a 1950s kind of theme. So the sights, the sounds. The playlist used to be no music or weird music. We had to come up with the sights, the sounds, the smells. All of the whole experience, the phone, how do we answer the phone, the sights, the sounds, the smells, what do we say on the phone? Just go through your business, and you can circle on page 112 and 113 some of the things that you can do to make your business stand out, but you want to stand out, and the best example I could give you for an obvious one, who here has seen the Dental Depot in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or the Dental Depot in your city? It's a dentist in the shape of a train, right? It's a dentistry, and they have a big train up front. What does that have to do with dentistry? Not a lot, but kids like it, so they talk about it. Now you know about it. You just want to you want to make sure your business stands out. You want to make sure that you're breaking out of the clutter. Can you talk to me, talk to the listeners out there? Let's say that somebody here is kind of where you were. You're kind of at the bottom, and you're now going, okay, I know, I got $100. How did you do that? Because somebody out here is going to have to probably call a family member and say, I need $50,000 to revitalize my business that's not doing so well, or you have to call a bank, and you might not be doing that well right now. Can you explain how you did that? Yes. Because we made so many mistakes in attracting investment, and it's the same mistakes that a lot of businesses make. It's, again, another one of these wonderful accidental discoveries where we were doing everything that was obvious, and it clearly wasn't working. And what we were doing that was obvious was essentially CEO and CFO are literally going door to door in New York and in Boston and Chicago, visiting banks, investment banks, looking for money. We need a line of credit. And showing, here's all the numbers, here's everything we're doing. And the entire investment community in unison said, tough. We don't care. Why would we? Look, you're associated with outlaws and thugs. The motorcycle market's in a downturn. The economy was very recessionary at that time. It's like, why would we invest in you? By accident. Essentially, hearts on their sleeves. At 4:45 p.m. on December 31st of 1985, and the only reason I give you that timing is the bankruptcy filing was slated for January 2nd of 1986, the first hour of business. This is the last hour of financial markets being open in 1985. CEO and CFO are sitting across from somebody who agrees to have a meeting on New Year's Eve, and instead of giving the number story, give the heart story. Very passionate. We love this. This means the world to us. This means the world to millions of people around the world. Think of Vietnam era veterans, World War II veterans, people that have that Harley tattoo on their arm. This means something to them. We can't let this die. And what the person sitting across from them, who just happened to own a motorcycle, not a Harley, but thank God, literally got like a lump in his throat and said, I believe you. I believe in what you guys are telling me. The passion is overriding the need, essentially. I've heard, because they hear these stories 100 times a day. Now, instead of getting a numbers, cause and effect story, they're seeing people that they believe, seeing people that are incredibly passionate, and people that they could willingly feel like they could take a risk on and support. They got the loan. The interest on that loan, interestingly, was 20.5%. So think about that next time you borrow money. However, that was the lifeline that kept the business alive. In that then CEO who recently died, and the CFO that was with it, will say to their till their memories dissipate, that was an enormous eye-opener in terms of perception and the way people see them and what they represent to the business. And what they represent to the business isn't the dollars, it's the people, it's the hearts behind the business. Because when someone's investing in potential, they're investing in emotion and a gut feel and likability, and I like you and I believe you and I trust you, more than they are investing in how much hardware is going to be sold. How much debt do you have? Those kind of questions. It totally changed the conversation.
As we go to page 114, if you have a question for Ken, we're going to open up for questions here in just a moment. I want you to just go through this checklist, and for sake of time, circle any of these items where you don't have a plan. Okay? So, point one, your unique service offering. Elephant in the room. It's like a country club for men's hair. Okay? That is what that business is. It's higher end. OxyFresh. It's the world's greenest carpet cleaner. Dr. Robert Zellner & Associates. It's home of the $99 first exam glasses. The auto auction, by the way, is decorated to look like a Harley Davidson dealership. Cool. You got to go see that. It looks just like a Harley Davidson dealership. You got to think about what is your unique product offering or service offering. If you don't have it, circle it. Put me a question on the board. I'll be happy to ask you. I'll be happy to answer your question. 3, unique decor. Most small businesses that I go into, the environment and the decor is semi-soul-sucking. I cannot tell you how many employees with degrees will apply for a job here, and I'll say, what appealed to you? They go, it's just fun. Yeah. That's the whole, and I'm like, I know, I've spent a lot of time in here. But it's a certain atmosphere we've tried to create here. I can't tell you how many people I've met who are doctors, dentists, and lawyers who've left to go work for the fun dentist, or the dentist with the decor that matters, or how many people go drink coffee at Starbucks and they're kind of like leasing the space and they're just getting free coffee is how they look at it. They just like the decor, the atmosphere. The unique music. You've got to have music that fits. If you go into Hobby Lobby, the music is a certain kind. If you go into Starbucks, it's a certain kind. The experience. You got to think about, what can I do? There's high-end grocery stores that are offering a ton of samples right now that goes over very well. A unique smell. Your branding, your logos, your color. Are you Tiffany blue? What are you? What's your branding? Give back. People today, according to a book called, it's Jackie Freiberg's research, and they researched Lululemon and Warby Parker and Tom Shoes and Apple, and people are 3 times more likely to buy from a company that gives a percentage back to a charity than one that doesn't. 3 times more. If you're comparing this plumber versus that plumber, the one who gives back, you're willing to do business with them. Deep empathy. Are you asking your customers, how can we make it better like Harley was doing? And just the overall experience. I mean, do you have it nailed down? Southwest is the funny airline with the low fares. Disney is the most magical place in the world, right? Whole Foods. If you have dreadlocks, you'll probably get hired to work at Whole Foods. Right? Everything's written in chalk. It's a certain experience. There's a guy who is obsessed with kale working at Whole Foods. It's just a thing. It's a culture. What is your culture? Now, I want to open it up. We got about 15 minutes here of Ken's time, and I want to open up for any questions that you guys have. It could be related to branding or marketing, or it could be related to his time at Harley, or anything at all, really. And if it's crazy, he'll stick me on you. So what's your question for Ken? Yes, sir, Nathan. So the question is, most business have to pivot at some point, and you're asking what again now?
That's a great question. And yes, there was a little luck in there, but not luck in terms of, we had lucky charms. Luck was more that we took what we were beginning to see and actually acted on it instead of doing what most businesses do, which is continuously talking about acting on it and then never actually doing it. The fundamental change, the fundamental pivot point in your vernacular was when we were out doing those demos and we found that people want to see us succeed. And when we were asking them questions and involving them in the process, what do we know about people? People support what they help create or feel they help create. So if they're involved in the process of changing the product or changing the service or changing anything, they're going to come back for more of that. And we begin sort of thinking to ourselves, sort of like, because all we've ever done is glorify product and talk about features and benefits of product and how the product is made, because that's what we thought we were supposed to do. And that's what all of our competitors do. Let's talk about the iron, the steel, how the metal is bent, how the welds are done, how the paint's put on, how much torque you're getting, all that. Never dawned on anybody that was not creating any demand for us whatsoever, because that's the way everybody does it. There's nothing different about that. There's nothing unique. There's nothing really sellable about that. What we found, though, is because larger crowds kept showing up, is that this human side of the coin, which was the side that we never bothered looking at, was more attractive to people than just the product side of the coin. So what we're going to do fundamentally as a business is, yes, we're going to build the best bikes the world has ever seen, but we're going to change our outward-looking emphasis, not on pushing product, but on delighting human beings. How can we be way more, infinitely more human than our competitors that push product? How can we make ourselves as people more likable? And the way for us to make ourselves more likable was to be more present. It was to get in front of the people that we hope to serve. Let them see us serving them, and let that word of mouth, let those people tell their friends. And that's exactly what happened. The pivot point that launched, though, was we found we began doing a way better job of relating to potential customers and riders than we were doing inside the company. There's a fundamental rule that says the way people see your business is a direct reflection of your internal culture. So there was a disconnect, and we were awesome at relating to customers, but we didn't talk inside the company to each other very well. So we were saying, look, if we're making the needle move by getting in front of the people that we hope to serve in the marketplace, that's what we have to do on the inside. I need to delight. If I'm in the parts department, I need to be delighting the people in the engineering and the manufacturing departments. They're my customer. I need to get in front of them, ask how I can serve them better, ask what we can do together better, what an absolute mind-blowing success would look like to them so that I can provide that to them. As that begins to take hold, and with executive leadership, CEO banging on this over, we're going to be visible, we're going to get in front of people. I, as a leader, am going to make good and make sure that everybody in the business is doing this. Once that took hold, the world saw us for who we were, right? The culture reflected the reality. This is a very human business, a very caring business, a more likable business. At the end of the day, to the point you just made, if you're just a little bit more likable than the people you're competing against, you win 100% of the time. Because you can't sell me anything I can't get from somebody else for less money. But if I like you a little bit better, I'm coming your way.
I will say that there's a notable quotable from Seth Godin that somebody needs to hear today. He says, if you're remarkable, it's likely that some people won't like you. That's a part of the definition of being remarkable. Nobody gets unanimous praise ever. The best the timid could hope for is to be unnoticed. Criticism comes to those who stand out. So as an example, if you voted for Obama, you didn't vote for Trump. And quit saying you're moderate, because you voted for one of them. And so you can't sit there and go, I'm kind of in the middle, because you'll never win. So have you ever heard a Harley? I mean, you can tell it's a Harley. You know it's a Harley. And some people are like, I would never drive a Harley. That's okay. They don't need everybody to like them. They just need some people to love them. And so you've got to figure out your unique value proposition. There was a plumber we worked with in San Jose who realized that no one in town knew who he was. So he auto-wrapped all of his vehicles in neon green. And his whole theme was, we'll save you green. You call us, the service call is free. So we'll show up on time. The service call is free. So you don't have to wait on us. We'll get there. It's a free service call. When we get there, we'll diagnose the problem. If you want us to fix it, we'll quote it right there. But if not, we won't. You're not going to wonder what's the bill going to be, but it's free to come out, And they're neon green. And he'd gone into bankruptcy twice. And I talked to him. And I said, why did you finally auto-wrap your vehicles neon green? He goes, well, I thought about it like 2 bankruptcies ago. But I just didn't want to be ever made fun of. I didn't want to be cheesy. And then my wife was like, we are lucky to be in business this third time. We need to stand out. And so there's somebody out there fighting that idea. Like, you kind of have an idea of how to stand out, but you're kind of afraid to do that. And Harley has done a great job with that. What other questions do you have for Ken Schmidt? Anybody? Yes, in the back, Mr. Scott, I believe. And then we'll go to you, sir.
Correct. Humanity. Remember I said that the product was seen as awesome, and dealership floor traffic went up, but people weren't pulling the trigger. And then we're asking dealers, like, why can't you close the deal? Using all the selling vernacular. Why can't you make the sale? Why can't you close? Did you tell them about the quality? I said, of course we told them about the quality. You tell them about all these awards we got. Of course we did. So why aren't they pulling the trigger? And I said, because they can't justify the cost. Like, what are we really paying for here? And that's really sort of the pivot point where it's product to product. You couldn't win on a dollar standpoint. Our stuff was like 50 to 60% more to do the exact same thing. Go forward. So the decision, do we have to lower our price to compete on product, which of course is a sucker's game, it's never going to pay out for us, or do we find this different way to compete? And management hated having these discussions with us. They hated it because they were manufacturing people, manufacturers, engineers, finance people who grew up in a world of product. And geez, the product speaks for itself. You know who says the product speaks for itself? A jackass. All right?
Real quick, I mean that.
We've not anybody that believes that is screwed. You might as well pack it up and go home. The world has never worked that way.
I'm gonna heal somebody out here that needs a healing. Here we go. I've run into a lot of people that have a really cool product they've made, like a hair product or a product, a new shampoo or a new widget, and they say, I'm going to sell it on Amazon and make millions. I'm like, I just want to throw it out there for you. If you're going to try to compete on price up there, you will lose all of your savings, and then you'll say you're right. And I've had so many people call me back 4 or 5 years later going, I got killed on Amazon. You've got to find a different way to stand out in this cluttered commerce. You have to stand out. You can't be the lowest price. That's what you're going to die. Unless you can be. Unless you're like Walmart.
Yeah, Walmart is scaled to do that.
That's like the only example. I mean, Faith, I think it's Faith, right? You got a question, sir. How did those big pivot conversations go with key players?
Initially, those discussions went pretty horrible. Because essentially what we were looking to do is entirely reinvent the business in a very short time frame. Because at that point in time, by the mid-'80s, the company's over 80 years old. It's one of the oldest manufacturing companies in the world, building motorcycles. So that everybody working for the business knew just one thing: build product, sell product, service product. So asking people that are dyed-in-the-wool product people that radically changed the approach of the business was not being well received. And it wasn't being well received just because we were asking people to change their approach. It wasn't well received because of where the message was coming from. And where the message was coming from was, quote unquote, the corporate office. You're the ones that screwed up the business. You're the ones that drove it to bankruptcy. So why should we believe anything? Why should we listen to you? That was the pushback. Remember I mentioned the two model dealerships that we built. We learned to shut up. So dealers listen to other dealers, just like welders listen to other welders. So we're going to put these dealers up. We're going to make them the focal point of the discussion of the challenges they had, but also the results that they had. And once they started putting up charts that look like this, everybody put their cigarettes down and pulled their pens out and started scribbling. Oh, this stuff works. I need to do this. That's essentially the pivot point. So now they're getting a believable message from a believable source. I can't tell you how important that was. Again, we brought that back into the company. Instead of telling welders how to work more efficiently, it's, we need to speed this up. We need to be able to produce more bike frames per day. How would you guys, if you were running this company, do it? 100% of people asked a question will answer the question. They'll say, here's how I would change the layout, says guy who's been welding for 25 years, who knows a lot about what he's talking about. Powell, we're going to give you enough rope to hang yourself. Go do that. Do it. They would do it in other departments in the business. Well, we want to change what we're doing over here in the paint department. Let's see your plan. Do it. It becomes a very contagious thing when people feel a sense of empowerment and accountability. People are watching me. I'm taking a risk here. If I do it and it pays off, I'm going to get a lot of praise. I'm going to get rewards. It's going to help the company. It's good for everybody. And again, it's very, very contagious behavior. And that's sort of when leadership starts saying, hey, our job isn't to tell people what to do.
Yeah.
Our job is to create an environment where people feel like they can contribute and be listened to. If we give them enough responsibility and give them enough freedom to make their own decisions and step back, they will rise and they will do that.
Ken, Eric Chupp this week has been working with a lot of his clients. Yeah. He has written down some questions that they wanted to ask you.
Mm-hmm. You let Chupp work with clients?
They're faux clients. They're not real clients. We tell them that.
Okay. My mom and some other people.
Paid friends. Okay.
I love Chupp. He rocks.
One of the questions that I actually had as well as when I was talking to some people is, you guys knew there was a change that needed to happen in the business, and how did you guys get past suffering from that paralysis by analysis mentality and getting into action like you were talking about?
No money.
Okay. So no other option.
Because I spent a lot of time in Detroit, especially late 90s, early 80s, talking to car companies, and they're all, everybody wants to do the same thing. Everybody wants to get more competitive. Everybody wants to make more people buy their products. Everybody wants to create magic at the point of retail. They'd always say, how did you motivate people? And the lucky blessing we had is we were broke. People realized we have to do something different or we're screwed. Versus look at Detroit, they'll do nothing for years.
I'm not going to argue with every motivational speaker in the world. Maybe there's one who agrees with me. But the thing is there's this, people say fear means false evidence appearing real. That's what it means. That's what I struggle with.
Wow.
Well, growing up without money, to me, it's always meant for real evidence appearing real. Like, I have no money, so I'm going to get 3 jobs. And people typically don't look for a breakthrough until a breakdown. They like to get to the very bottom, to their last dollar, to their last day, to the last, divorce, pre-divorce thing, right to the end of the last counseling session, to the end of then like, I need help. And I think the sense of urgency that they felt at Harley was caused by for real evidence appearing real. It wasn't like this false fear. It was going to end. And I think a lot of small business owners, we think we have longer than we have to make it work, but we got to make it work. We got to have that sense of urgency. Chuck, you have a couple more.
And also there's that internal sense of optimism. Things are going to turn my way because I work so hard and I believe so much in this that people are going to see that and they'll see us for who we really are, and then we're going to rock and roll.
Law of attraction.
Yep.
Come on, money. Money cometh. Money, who's seen that guy? Money cometh. Money cometh. It's not. You can't donate $10 to your church and get 1,000 back. Because if that worked that way, that'd be the new banking strategy. Let's donate all the money to the church and get tenfold return. Stop that. I know we're in the Bible Belt, but stop donating and getting tenfold returns. You got to sell something. Back to you, Chuck.
Okay, Ken, can you explain your look through the curve mentality and how that relates to riding a motorcycle and how you turned that into a business principle?
Yeah. Anybody here who owns a motorcycle, anybody here who's ever raced a motorcycle knows that one of the first lessons they teach you, let's say that we're riding a bike and we're whipping down the road on a long straightaway and we see like a 45 or 90 degree turn. That's a hell of a sharp turn. Most people's brain says, look at the turn. look at the pavement, look at where you want to see that bike go, and make it go. Those people end up dead. The rule of motorcycle is you don't look at the turn, you look at the exit of the turn. You look past the turn, because the bike's going to take you where your eyes are looking. You look at the exit instead of what's straight in front of you, that's where the bike goes. The metaphor for business, and this is, again, something that we really work with our dealers on, is the sale, the transaction, that's the turn. That's the point. That's the obvious challenge in front of me. And what most people focus on is the turn, not what's past the turn. So you say, what's past the turn here? What's past the turn is what that person that you're selling to or trying to sell to or having this discussion with, that's what that person is going to say about you to somebody else. What do I want this person to say? They're not going to talk about the transaction. Okay? They're going to talk about who's behind the transaction. We know this. So what do I need to say to this person? What do I need to do in front of this person that he or she will tell somebody else about? Look through the turn, not at the immediate need in front of you. 90% of people that buy a Harley this year are buying it not because they saw an ad for it, because there are very few ads for it. They're buying it because a friend or somebody that they sat next to on a long bus trip or somebody that they work with talked them into it. That's through the turn. That's the person that we serve delivering the message to somebody else, building our reputation and building demand.
Ken's going to be speaking tomorrow. I just want to throw this out there. If you have any questions specifically for Ken that didn't get answered during this session, you can write your question on the board over there and then just put a little dash Ken. And Harley, you can move that board so we can free it up there. And you can put Ken dash in the question. We'll make sure, because tomorrow we're going to do a little Q&A until our brains explode. But Marshall, you had one more question. Here we go, Marshall. Marshall's very tall. I'll give you the mic. Here we go.
Ken, especially with Harley, it's a huge organization when you're coming into it, and you are shifting the culture, you're shifting the core values, right? And so there's multiple layers in order to communicate it through, right?
Right.
And some people were on board, some people were not on board with the shift. How did you guys make the decision when it was time to keep beating it into their skulls to adopt this new culture? Or how did you decide when it was time to bring in somebody new that shared those core values? How do you decide between adopting new culture and or firing and bringing in new people?
Great question. Here's what the culture looked like then. You had probably 60% of the people that work for the company were right around age 50. So these people who are very, very invested in the business, been there a long time, have been doing things the same way their entire career. A lot of them started when they were 18 years old. Then you had people my age, people at 30-ish, getting involved in this, who want to start doing all this stuff differently. So there's an immediate clash between these kind of young lions who want to do it differently and these old guys that say, stop messing with me. I just want to ride out my time until I can retire. What we know about people is that we do what the boss tells us to do only when the boss is looking. Otherwise, we do what the boss does. Everybody that works for a living mirrors the behavior of their superior, of their boss, however it is you define that. So simply, learn the hard way like everybody else does, saying, from now on, we're going to be customer focused. Well, go make it happen, guys. And it goes nowhere. As we model the behavior of our superiors, if we're going to change the culture, that means the people that are most responsible for that, being leadership, need to be the most visible, passionate advocates for the process as humanly possible. They're the ones that other people are going to model. We very quickly found pockets of tremendous success in the business. I mentioned it a second ago, like the welding area, the painting area, where people were taking responsibility for what they were doing. Other people saw that. Hey, we want to do this too, but we also saw other people, other departments that for whatever reason were unwilling to change and weren't showing up at meetings. And I need to tell you, this was a union environment. So when people were coming in for these meetings about how they were going to be changing their work areas, they're doing this on their own time, which in a union environment typically doesn't happen. Again, they want to save their jobs. We also saw areas where absolutely nothing was happening, where employees that were working in those departments were posting for every job available anywhere else in the company. It's like, I want to be over here where good it's happening versus here where nothing's happening. 100% of the time, it was very easy to identify the source of the problem, and that was a leader, manager, team leader, department head who simply wasn't buying in. That's old guard and do it the way we've always done it. Screw these guys, they don't know what they're talking about approach. Essentially, every one of them got the sit down, and you know what the sit downs look like. You're going to get along or you're going to go along. You're going to be gone. And we know about dominant businesses is that people actually like accountability. A lack of accountability creates chaos. When employees see people in leadership functions within the business either being disciplined or being suddenly gone, they get the message pretty clearly. Like, hey, this is for real, folks. We need to do this. And I, as a leader, need to be exhibiting this behavior or I'm going to be next. People bought in. And once the tide changed, and once the world suddenly fell in love with us, every media outlet in the country said, look at what this company's doing, all this really amazing, very, very human, very, very simple stuff, and look at what the results are. Obviously, morale goes up, more people support it. Hey, how can I get involved? I want to do stuff too. I want to get promoted. And I want to be seen as somebody different tomorrow than I am today. Well, what do I need to be doing different, to get the promotion, to get the pay?
Thrivers, what we're going to do here is we're going to take a break till 10:20, but I want to make some housekeeping notes. Ken will be speaking tomorrow. We come back from the break, we're going to be talking about branding. Anything you need to know about branding, improving the image of your company. We're going to take a break from 10:05 to 10:20, and then Paul Hood is going to be serving lunch today, I believe, from courtesy of Los Cabos. That food will be served, so Paul will be coming up at 11 to speak with us a little bit there today. But let's hear it for Ken Schmidt, everybody.
Thank you.
Thrive Nation, if you're out there today and you're saying to yourself, well, what do I need to do as a result of what I've just learned? Well, let me give you an action list of action items that you can actually do as a result of what you've learned here today. Action step number 1. Take time to interview at least 100 of your current customers. Again, if you're an existing business, interview 100 of your current customers. Or you can interview 100 of your former customers. But what you want to ask them is this. You want to ask them this question. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest, how happy were you with my service and why? When they give you a number, an 8, a 9, or a 10, again, ask them why. And say, well, what could I do to take your experience with our product or service to a 10? And write that down. And once you've done that, you've now learned how to improve your business. Now, action item number 2 is create a product or a service that stands out from the clutter of commerce. Don't make a product that fits in with every other product. Harley could not beat the Japanese by out producing efficient motorcycles that sounded like zzz. They had to beat the Japanese by creating massive, loud, and arguably obnoxious American-made vehicles that their ideal and likely buyers would like. And the tricky part about making a remarkable product or service is that universal praise isn't possible. It's never going to happen. To quote the former Thrivetime show guest and the New York Times multiple times best-selling author Seth Godin, he writes, if you're remarkable, it's likely that some people won't like you. And that's part of the definition of being remarkable. Nobody gets unanimous praise ever. The best the timid could hope for is to be unnoticed. Criticism comes to those who stand out. So Thrive Nation, there you have it. Listen to your customers. Give them what they want and break out of the clutter of commerce with something remarkable. And Thrive Nation, if you learned something today, I would encourage you to share this with a friend or family member. You can download each and every show on iTunes, on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, or by just simply streaming the podcasts live at thrivetimeshow.com. Without any further ado, as always, 3, 2, 1, boom!